Britain's royal palaces. Majestic.
It's absolutely dripping in history.
Luxurious.
The White Drawing Room at Buckingham Palace is like a scene from a Disney film.
And packed to the rafters with incredible secrets.
Secrets that the royal family would much prefer not to be made public.
From royal courtships to royal births to royal marriages and scandals, the palaces have played host to all of that.
This series goes behind palace walls.
The royal palaces represent the monarchy and have incredible history.
We'll learn how these iconic creations were built.
16th century kings built with brick in a way that we wouldn't recognise today.
This is George IV leaving his mark on the centre of London.
Uncover the spectacular palace art housed within.
The royal collection is vast, and I mean vast.
It has more than 1 million objects spread across all of the royal palaces.
Just imagine what has been collected over centuries. So this collection is unlike any other collection in the world.
Discover their gruesome stories.
It's an amazing insight into the royals' history, but also our common history.
Frankly, if you're going to cut the head off a king, it's got to be done in a palace.
And relive the recent events that shaped the modern royal family.
The whole case was an absolute fiasco and a huge embarrassment.
The Queen was particularly aggrieved that Harry had done it in the way that he had.
This is The Secrets of the Royal Palaces. This time, royal security under the spotlight as the Queen gets locked out of her own palace.
Nelson's Gate wouldn't open, and the Queen was actually kind of locked out of her own house.
One of our most loved royals is revealed to the world at Balmoral.
The impact of these pictures was massive. They went around the world.
We explore the blueprints for the most famous royal palace in the world.
Every one of those rooms is a glitzy show-off piece.
And discover it has unwanted house guests.
Buckingham Palace has definitely got a rat problem.
And we reveal the secrets of one of its historic royal coaches.
The coach isn't just a way of getting the Queen from A to B, it's a time capsule of British history across the ages.
Royal palaces are found in every corner of the UK, from Balmoral and Holyrood in Scotland to Windsor and Kensington Palace in England.
There's no doubt that the royal residences are unrivaled, I think, around the world. You know, you have centuries of tradition, priceless artefacts, really important pieces of British heritage on display, and I think we're very lucky to have them.
And the history and heritage continue inside the palaces as well, as they also house thousands of priceless treasures.
The largest collection of art and furniture and beautiful treasures in the whole world.
It's really effectively all of these things that have been collected by monarchs over the years. So therefore it's a brilliant collection that reflects our nation's evolution and historical significance.
The Royal Collection tells us amazing things about the last 500 years of British and world history.
But at Kensington Palace, one of the most historically important artefacts is hidden in plain sight. The weather vane sits on top of Kensington Palace. Built in 1605, the palace is one of the country's most popular visitor attractions, with over 500,000 people a year walking through these gilded gates.
I think most people who come to Kensington Palace are hoping to spot a royal.
Sitting on the roof, this weather vane is one of the palace's most incredible secrets, a beautiful golden object nestled between the royal chimney pots.
When you approach Kensington Palace, if you look up on the rooftops, you might just make out the glitter of a weather vane, but there is more than meets the eye to this thing.
In 1689, the new monarch, William III, and his wife Mary, picked Kensington Palace as their home. These were turbulent times. Crucial battles were being won and lost on the high seas. Everyone was looking for an advantage, and this unassuming weather vane would become William's secret weapon.
He had his navy out at sea at battle, and by knowing what direction the wind was blowing in, he'd know whether battle would go in his favour or against him.
But it's what lies beneath this weather vane that makes it one of a kind.
What William did was he commissioned a really ingenious object that's somewhere between art and engineering. And what it meant was that he didn't need to be outside to see the direction of the weather.
Down in the King's Gallery, there is a map above the fireplace. This map is so important because it became the very centre of King William's military operations. It's got the 4 continents in the corner, and Great Britain has been made much larger in scale in comparison to the rest of Europe, particularly France, with whom England was at war at the time.
It's an amazing work of art, but what's incredible also is the metal dial and how that works.
Connecting the two are a series of pulleys. So as the weather vane moves on the roof of Kensington Palace, a dial shifts on the face of the map.
Instantly, William could see the direction of the wind and plot his next military manoeuvre on his map.
Harry on a knife
It was a
edge
game
as
changer,
George received
giving him a
royal
crucial
duties
edge
earlier
over
than
the enemy.
expected. Archie has no
Brilliant that they
tasks.
created,
Prince
and
William
amazingly
and
it's
Kate
still
Middleton
in
have been
perfect
told
working
their
order
children
more
might
than
have to
300
take on
years
royal
later.
duties earlier than expected, according
William's
to a royal
weather vane
expert.
may be subtle in
Although
its
she is
way,
looking forward
but
to her
Kensington
forthcoming
Palace most
Platinum
certainly isn't.
Jubilee. The
It's
Queen
one of
is
the most
95
public and
years
easily
old and no
accessible
longer
of
in
all
the
the
best of
palaces.
health following a scare last year.
For
Prince
privacy,
Harry and
the
Meghan
royals
Markle
retreat
stepped
back to
down from their
Scotland, to a
frontline
most
royal
secluded
roles in
palace.
2020 and moved to California
Balmoral.
shortly afterwards. Due to the
Located 100
allegations
miles
against him,
northeast of
which he
Edinburgh,
emphatically
Balmoral Estate
denies,
has been
Prince
a royal
Andrew
palace
has stepped
since
down from
1852,
frontline
when
royal
Queen Victoria
duties.
and Prince Albert bought
Therefore,
the land
the
and
Cambridges
commissioned
have
the cost.
allegedly been urged to step in for the Queen when needed.
Balmoral is where the
In
royals
some
go
ways,
on
they are
holiday,
an advert
but
for the
it's not
future
like
of the
the kind of
monarchy.
holiday the rest of us
However,
have.
according to royal expert Daniela
They are
Elsa,
welcome to
it will be
bagpipes in the
difficult for the
morning. They
Cambridges
are
to predict
piped
the level
into
of
dinner
public
in the
interest
evening.
in the
They
monarchy
dress
after
up
the
for
death of the
dinner in
Queen.
formal clothes.
Therefore,
It's quite a
William and Kate
rigid
will be
life,
faced with
but
some
between
difficult
those
choices about
markers
how
during
and
the
when
day,
to bring
there
their
is
3
enormous
children,
freedom.
Prince George,
the
Princess
one palace
Charlotte
they
and
can
Prince
almost
Louis into the
guarantee privacy,
limelight.
which is probably
Writing
why so
in the
many
New
royal
Zealand Herald,
relationships
Ms.
have
Elsa
blossomed.
argued that the monarchy needed the
Duke and Duchess
Cambridge
of Cambridge
children to take a
spent
more
time there
prominent
when
role in
Kate
order
was
to
first being
shore up
introduced
public
to the family.
support.
But probably
She said, the
the most
palace
famous
needs the
Balmoral
public to buy
romance
into the
happened
concept
in
of a monarchy,
1980.
which is why any growing disinterest is so dangerous for them. To shore up
Prince
public
Charles
support for the
was
royal
getting a bit of a
family, they
reputation
will need all
as a man
hands
about
on the
town
royal deck.
and was showing no
The
signs of
palace will
settling
have
down.
to deploy their most beguiling and adorable assets.
The
Namely,
first
the
duty of the
Cambridge
Prince of
3.
Wales was to
For
find a
Kate,
wife,
who has from day
produce
one
heirs
tried
to
to
the
instill
throne.
as much normality into her
That
family's
was their
life
number
as
one
possible.
priority,
The
securing
Duchess
the
of
line
Sussex
of
may feel
succession.
more of the weight of the world and
After a
feel
series
her
of failed
energy is more
relationships,
weakened than normal.
pressure was mounting from
Meghan
within his
Markle
family
and Prince
for him
Harry
to
are
find a
bracing for
suitable
contradicting experiences when it
He
comes
was
to their
over 30.
relationships and partnerships
He had a
this
string of
year.
girlfriends.
He is
His
bound to
father
have
felt
happiness
that
while
it
his
really
wife
was
will
important
face mental
that he
struggles.
needed to settle down.
Celebrity
stop being a
astrologer
playboy, stop
Kyle
playing
Thomas
the field,
predicted
and
what is
find
in
a
store
wife.
for the Duke and Duchess
And
of
the press
Sussex
was also
for
very
2022
going
and
into a feeding
2023.
frenzy whenever
He
Charles
said
was
that
seen
when
out
it
with a
comes to
lady.
their
There was a
relationships
lot of
and
speculation,
partnerships,
poor
the
fellow.
37-year-old
Whenever he
has
was
the
seen with
stars in
anybody,
his
is she
favour.
the one?
He said the royal will
He
feel
did
more
feel
synergy
pressure.
within
There's
his
no question from
partnerships
the
this
press,
year.
from the media,
Spotlights
and
upon the
indeed from his-
world
from his
stage
own
also
family.
will be present in 2022, especially
Then,
in the media.
in September
But there are a
1980,
few
Prince
different
Charles asked the
influences
Queen
this year that
to
could
invite his
cause
latest
Harry and
girlfriend,
Meghan to feel
Diana
2022
Spencer,
is
to
unique.
Balmoral for
Jupiter
the
is
weekend.
dancing across the
A
sky
positive
from
sign
Harry,
that this
bringing him
relationship
happiness
was
and
important
pleasure
to
in
him.
relationships,
But for
Thomas
any
said
potential
in his
wife or
piece for the
husband,
New
there is a
York
secret
Post.
tradition
On the
that
contrary,
takes place
the
at this
Duchess
wedding.
of Sussex may
The
feel more
Balmoral
of the
test,
weight
a
of the
pretty
world because
terrifying
Saturn
moment
is
for any
opposing Markle
would-be
directly
royal
in
girlfriend.
2022
You're really given
and
the-
Stay in one of these
2023.
royal
He
residences.
shared that
There's a
Meghan
lot of
Markle
pressure to
could
try and
suffer
get it
some
right.
mental or physical
And,
health difficulties or
other
feel
girlfriends
her
of Prince
energy is
Charles
more
have
weakened
fallen
than
down.
normal. She could also
Would
feel
Diana
that she's
pass the
being more
Balmoral
distant
test?
in her
This
partnerships,
was a
but the
make-or-break
key to
moment
solving
for the
this
budding
is that she
relationship.
needs to speak up.
The Queen thought this
If she
girl was
does,
completely
she'll
charming
get the
and
love,
she seems to
support,
love everything
and
about the
aid
outdoors,
that she
which of course she
needs,
didn't at
he
all.
said.
But she
Thomas
was
added
really
that Saturn
putting
will
on a
also
good show.
venture across the sky
Diana
for
was
the
a
Duke of
huge hit
Sussex
at
from
Balmoral that summer.
2023
She
until
fitted in with everything that the
2026.
royals do up
This
there.
could cause him
She
some
went for long
challenges for his
walks, she
energy,
fell in puddles
health,
of mud
and
and got up and
relationships during that time.
Everybody fell
However,
for her that
he is
weekend.
certain that the couple will make it through as long as they work together. Once they get through that, they'll be stronger than ever before.
And Diana
Thomas
was
said
very
that
happy
Prince
to
Harry
help.
and
She
Meghan
rolled up
Markle
her
can do
sleeves,
anything
by
they
all
want
accounts.
as long as
She
they put
absolutely
their
nailed
mind
it.
and heart to it.
Coming
He
up,
even
the
predicted that
secrets
their
of the
marriage
royal
will
palaces.
last long because the
We learn
romantic
how
sizzle
Diana
plus
was
the
always
long-term
one step
stability
ahead
needed
of
to
the
last
palace
forever are
paparazzi.
present.
When
He
I
said
moved
that they
to
can
either
balance
side
and reflect
to try
each
and
other
photograph
while
her,
still being true to
she
their
used
own
the mirror to keep a tree
individuality,
between
while
me
still
and her.
being...
Very clever.
And we discover how the Queen Mother dealt with unwanted house guests.
She got the gun and she used to shoot them in the ruins of this part of Buckingham Palace.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
The royal palaces come in all shapes and sizes. Some are opulent and luxurious, while others are more homely and simple. Palaces like Buckingham Palace demand attention, another backdrop for huge affairs of state, while others are just for the family, more secluded and secretive. In September 1980, one palace, Balmoral, was hiding a secret within its 50,000 acres. A secret that, when it got out, was going to change the royal family forever.
The royal family have an annual holiday at Balmoral. It is one of the high spots of their year, and they are very private there. The press normally leave them alone for quite a lot of the time when they're at Balmoral.
But this year, they were joined by Prince Charles's girlfriend, Diana Spencer. She had already passed the royals' Balmoral test and got the family blessing. But now, she faced the toughest test of all. How would she deal with the press?
The press knew that there was someone around, but they couldn't quite identify which of the glamorous, bright young things who were sort of fluttering around Charles was the latest girlfriend was. So they kind of got away with it for a bit.
Photographer Ken Lennox was a regular visitor to Balmoral, taking pictures of the royals on the moors and around the estate.
I arrived early because Prince Charles would often do a spot of fishing in the River Dee. As I walked from the car towards the river, I saw that there was a young girl there, blonde, quite close to Prince Charles. The girl saw me and left Prince Charles and went into some giant fir trees. The next thing I saw, a compact mirror coming out from behind a tree.
She turned her back to them, and I think she held up a mirror so she could see them, and they saw the mirror glinting.
In her life, Diana proved herself savvy.
She deliberately didn't want to be photographed. She used that mirror as she walked away, and when I moved to either side to try and photograph her, she used the mirror to keep a tree between me and her. Very clever.
I think there's a very good argument for saying that the way she behaved that morning on the riverbank did display an early sign of her unique savviness when it came to spotting a camera and the activities of the press.
It must have been dawning on Diana now what she was letting herself in for.
Keen to capture this newcomer, Ken returned to the riverbank in the afternoon.
A Range Rover arrived, and I saw the girl again. And this time, she turned and looked at me. She turned and looked right into the lens. I took a photograph, through some snow, and she turned her head away and went into the fishing hut. But when I got back, despite the bad light and the snow and everything, I got a recognisable photograph of this girl, Lady Diana Spencer.
Ken didn't know it then, but he had just captured the first evidence of a relationship between Prince Charles and his future wife.
I didn't think of romance at all at that stage. It was when one of the royal retinue said to me, "I hear you photographed young Diana Spencer." I said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "Don't dismiss it, Ken," which indicated that he thought there was more to come and that it wasn't just a weekend thing.
These pictures were the definitive proof of a relationship between Charles and Diana. Ken had a scoop. Charles's new girlfriend and potential future queen.
When these pictures were published, oh, is it a new girl in Prince Charles's life? Who is she? And she's very much in the sort of Balmoral milieu. This aroused lots and lots of interest and lots of speculation, which is great for the press, but more difficult, I think, if you're Diana.
The impact of these pictures was massive. They went around the world because at that moment he was the most eligible bachelor in the world, and the fact that this girl, Diana, we now know, was back there so soon after the first spotting obviously was significant.
She was suddenly front page news, and really from that time on, from September 1980 onwards, for the rest of her life, Diana was on the front pages, and she rarely left them.
Hidden away in the Highlands of Scotland, Balmoral had proved the perfect palace backdrop for this blossoming relationship. Buckingham Palace, on the other hand, was designed to be seen. It's the most famous and most visited of all the royal palaces.
It's pomp and circumstance, it's royalty, it's queen, it's the most iconic palace in the entire world.
Buckingham Palace is Monarchy HQ. It is the headquarters of the firm, the British royal family.
Buckingham Palace was the brainchild of one man, King George IV.
George IV was a very self-indulgent king. He loved the pomp and pageantry, and he wanted a palace that was fit for a monarchy that had growing world significance.
When George IV came to the throne in 1820, Royal HQ was St. James's Palace. In his eyes, it was old-fashioned and cramped. So he set his sights on a royal building 2 miles down the road, Buckingham House. George felt it was a building he could transform into a palace worthy of someone of his status.
This was transformative. It was entirely new. He wanted to recast Buckingham House into a building on a European scale.
And there was only one architect who could execute George's grand ambitions to build the ultimate palace: John Nash. He'd already built some of the most spectacular buildings Britain had ever seen, including the Theatre Royal Haymarket and Brighton's Royal Pavilion.
George IV, the showman, always wanted to show off, and Nash was the man to do it for him. Nash had turned the middle of London into a theatrical promenade. He was ingenious.
Nash set about transforming Buckingham House into George's vision of a royal palace, doubling the main block in size and massively enlarging the rest.
This is George IV leaving his mark on the centre of London.
But only part of Nash's exterior remains today, and it is only seen by a privileged few.
For those lucky few invited to a garden party, say, there is an opportunity to see the rear elevations. Yellowy sandstone sloping down to lawns, and beyond them gardens a lake.
It's a neo-French classical style, and it's now, of course, hidden from public gaze.
However, the back of the palace was relatively dull in comparison with George and Nash's plan for the front.
The pièce de résistance was Marble Arch.
The arch was built in front of the palace as its grand entrance.
A marble from Italy. Every time the monarch swept through there, it would be with an imperial grandeur.
But unfortunately, George never did get to sweep through the arch. He died in 1830, aged 67, before his grand palace was completed. The first monarch to move in was Queen Victoria in 1837, but she felt the palace wasn't big enough and started a major expansion project.
She added an east wing. She basically needed more room for the kids.
And the first casualty of her build was George's Marble Arch.
This arch was basically in the way. It needed to be moved for her to extend the palace.
Marble Arch was painstakingly moved, stone by stone, to its current location at the end of Oxford Street.
Marble Arch used to be the entrance to Buckingham Palace. Now it's sort of in a busy roundabout.
It must have been something of a heartbreaker of a job to dismantle something and then rebuild it for no purpose. As what? A folly, an eye-catcher? It just sits there. It was a monument that no one really wanted.
But for all Buckingham Palace's pomp and grandeur, it's been hiding a secret for centuries. A secret it would very much like to get rid of. Rats.
Buckingham Palace has definitely got a rat problem. When Queen Victoria moved to Buckingham Palace, Queen, she was shocked by how many rats there were. The rats treated Buckingham Palace like their own personal playground, and when Victoria moved in, she tried to put a stop to it, and really it ended up being a bit of a battle. It got so bad that Victoria had to appoint her own rat catcher. And this was Jack Black, whose title was VR, Rat and Mole Catcher to Her Majesty. And he really was the rat whisperer. I think that Victoria really hoped that he would exterminate the rats for good, but I'm afraid he didn't. The rats continued to plague Buckingham Palace throughout the reigns of all the monarchs. And in World War II, the Queen Mother used to use the rats as target practice. So she had a gun and she was practicing for what to do in case Hitler invaded and she was kidnapped. So she was using these rats for target practice. She got the gun and she used to shoot them in the ruins of this crumbled part of Buckingham Palace. So the rats have always been a problem throughout all of Buckingham Palace. As recently as 2019, exterminators were called in because rats were seen tearing through the royal kitchens. I honestly think that the best place to be in London if you're a rat is Buckingham Palace. There's lots of food, there's lots of hidden places, there's lots of holes because it's such an old house. So rats have a good time in Buckingham Palace and they historically always lurking under the floorboards.
Still to come on Secrets of the Royal Palaces, Nash and George's grand front gate has gone, but the palace's dazzling staterooms more than compensate.
The White Drawing Room is exquisite, and that's so deliberate. It's all about reinforcing the mystery of monarchy.
And a royal hellraiser wreaks havoc at St. James's.
Suddenly his court became one of extravagance, of hedonism, and certainly of women.
The British royal palaces are as individual as the monarchs they house.
For good or ill, these palaces were lived in by the people that were ruling over us going back over 1,000 years. So they're an insight into the history of the country, into the archaeology, into the domestic practices, and it's an incredible insight into everybody's history.
The palaces can change as often as the monarchs, falling in and out of favour, being bought, sold, demolished, or extended. But some extensions are more famous than others.
When you think of Buckingham Palace, you actually think of the balcony. Ask anybody across the world, and the landmark they want to go see the most when they come and visit is the infamous balcony.
For over a century, it's been the focal point for our national celebrations.
It is the place where the royal family and the people connect.
Walking out there and seeing the crowds of people cheering must be overwhelming.
This stone platform has become the place where we welcome new monarchs and celebrate royal marriages. On this balcony, some traditions have been shaped by popular demand. Prince George of Kent and Princess Marina became the first royals to wave to the crowds in 1934. And in 1981, Prince Charles and Princess Diana bowed to the crowd cheers and became the first newlyweds to kiss on the balcony. A tradition that continues today. The balcony we know today was born out of an ambitious plan to overhaul London's ceremonial centre in the early 20th century. Architect Aston Webb not only gave the palace a new front of Portland stone, but also widened the mall and created Admiralty Arch.
I think if George IV had seen Buckingham Palace today, he'd say, "That's what I was talking about." It starts with a version of Marble Arch. Then the Great Road of the Mall frames a processional view of Buckingham Palace. And then he guides your eye to the very centre by setting underneath the focal pediment a balcony. And the royal family themselves become the very focus of the end of this long parade of greatness.
But when Webb began work, Buckingham Palace didn't have a balcony at all.
The facade presented to the world was one that could have been the front of a hotel or railway station or one of London's clubs.
To transform Buckingham Palace into a more suitable seat of power, Webb naturally turned to Stockport.
If you were to take the main part of Lyme Park in Cheshire and just glue it on, you wouldn't be far off what you're looking at today.
George V oversaw Webb's work. He made sure that the palace's balcony was front and centre, so that it could be used on occasions when the king and other members of the royal family wished to show themselves to the people. Just months after the building was completed, World War I broke out, and the crowds gathered to seek reassurance from the king. But perhaps the balcony's most defining moment came on VE Day in 1945.
They talked of it being draped in crimson and fringed in gold, across the sort of grey slash that is the frontage of Buck Pal. There is this kind of extraordinary flicker of hope and majesty around which everyone could gather and cheer and say hallelujah because the war was over. It gives a focal point, if you like, for national emotion.
Millions watch the royal family standing on the palace's balcony, unaware it's a copy of a Stockport stately home. But not all monarchs use their palaces to celebrate moments of national pride. Back in the 17th century, in particular, hell-raising Earl used St. James's Palace to throw bashes that threatened to ruin the reputation of his king, Charles II.
Charles had a group of male friends, which was perhaps the most shocking group of male friends you could possibly imagine, and they were called the Merry Gang. His court became one of extravagance, of hedonism, and certainly of women. The head of this lot was John Wilmot, 2nd Earl of Rochester, who we know now through what are the rudest poems in the canon of English literature you will ever find. I mean, there aren't many about trees and flowers, frankly, that everyone did go too far. And what he did was he wrote this poem called A Satire on Charles II, and it was savage. It savaged the king, it savaged the court, and it was so disdainful. And this is the worst line for me. Rochester said of the king, "Restless he rolls about, from whore to whore, a merry monarch, scandalous and poor." So Rochester really was never again the king's friend. This poem marks the final break. That was the end of Rochester as being part of the king's court, until his death, finally, fittingly, of syphilis in 1680.
When royal palaces aren't being temples to debauchery. They're normally used as working buildings, the offices of the monarchy. Buckingham Palace is the Queen's main work address. It's here she spends most of her weekdays, carrying out the duties of state. But most Thursdays, she gets to get away from the office and travel up to Windsor, the palace she thinks of as home.
Windsor Castle is the Queen's favourite of all of the royal residences. It is the one place that she considers home. Windsor is the one that means the most to her.
It's a journey that's made most weeks and should run like clockwork.
It's all about communication. When Her Majesty leaves Buckingham Palace, they will choose a route and through an encrypted system will inform Windsor Castle that Her Majesty is on way and that the ETA is roughly half an hour or whatever.
But on the 5th of March, the Queen turned up at one of the palace's many side entrances, ready to start her weekend, only to find the gates of the castle firmly shut.
The convoy arrived at Nelson's Gate in Windsor. It wouldn't open. And the Queen was actually kind of locked out of her own house.
Normally with royalty, it's rather like the door at number 10, it opens as you arrive. Similarly with royalty arriving at a palace, the gates open and then the gates shut after she's gone in. But just didn't seem to happen this particular day, which is astonishing, really.
Clearly, communication went wrong with whoever was charged with opening that door.
The Queen, who values punctuality, can be seen looking very fed up in the back of her car with one of her dogs for company.
Passers-by were taking pictures and kind of laughing because the Queen kind of sat there like a sitting duck. It was all rather embarrassing.
Unfortunately, the gates of the castle remained shut, even after a little gentle persuasion from one of her protection officers.
One of the bodyguards got out, a female bodyguard. I think
With the gates not budging, they had no choice but to try something else.
When the Queen is in a motorcade, you have to keep moving. You never ever want to stop. That's why they sail through red lights and they've got police outriders, because the moment the car with the principal stops, they're a sitting target. So the protocol is always to keep moving.
I would imagine temperatures went up somewhat, but you are trained to look at plan B and plan C if necessary.
The cops had to do a U-turn. The cars had to do like a kind of circuit of Windsor while they alerted staff to get the gate open.
Thankfully, after a quick trip around the block, her security team managed to contact the castle and inform them they had a rather annoyed monarch waiting to get into her own house.
Whether they were embarrassed, I don't know. Whether they were angry, possibly. The Queen always says, famously, get it right.
I don't imagine the Queen would have personally given them a rocket, but perhaps the message would have come down that one was not amused.
The royal palaces house an extraordinary range of art and design objects, and some are as practical as they are beautiful. None more so than the Queen's collection of carriages, a vital and iconic part of any royal celebration. These carriages are usually reserved for big occasions, coronations, state visits, royal weddings, or the opening of Parliament.
The royals have to use these carriages because it's tradition.
It's what we all remember, it's what we see in the history books, it's what we envision.
They form part of that pomp and ceremony and circumstance that we associate with monarchy and that the public enjoy.
I never want the royal carriages to go away.
There are more than 100 coaches in the royal collection, and the most important carriages are held here, at Buckingham Palace's Royal Mews. The newest coach on the Mews is the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, which made its first appearance in 2014 as the Queen set out from the palace for the state opening of Parliament.
The Jubilee coach looks really like a kind of classic fairy tale coach. Black and gold. It's got all the symbols of monarchy. It's more than 5 metres long, it's 3 metres high, and it needs 6 horses to get it going.
And of course, the perfectly clean and large windows allow her subjects a glimpse of the monarch as she passes by.
We can see them much better. If they were in a car, it's faster. There's not as many sort of...
And due to a secret 360-degree camera hidden in the golden crown on the top of the coach, the Queen gets to peek out at her subjects as they peek in. Coming up on Secrets of the Royal Palaces, we reveal the secrets hidden inside the Queen's most luxurious carriage.
You can see immediately that something special is going on.
And in our final tour of Buckingham Palace, we take you into the heart of the incredible staterooms, dripping with gold, and a hidden passageway.
The White Drawing Room at Buckingham Palace is like a scene from a Disney film in many ways.
Which is on the Mews at Buckingham Palace, had its first public outing in 2014. The coach, made in Australia, was originally designed for the Queen's 80th birthday in 2006.
The coachmaker was a man called Jim Frecklington, and I think it's fair to say he was an obsessive. He had actually already designed a coach for the Queen. That was the Australian state coach that was gifted to her in 1988. But with this, he wanted to do something even more extraordinary.
Frecklington wanted the coach to be history personified and packed with historic artefacts.
You can see immediately when you look inside the coach that something special is going on. It's got this incredible patchwork of different small wooden panels. There's a piece of Canterbury Cathedral, there's a piece of Carnarvon Castle, there's something from 10 Downing Street, you've got something from Henry VIII's flagship, the Mary Rose, there's even something from the apple tree that Isaac Newton sat under. The handrails are a very personal touch for the Queen because they come from the decommissioned royal yacht Britannia.
The coach isn't just a way of getting the Queen from A to B. It's a museum on wheels. It's a time capsule of British history across the ages.
All in all, it took nearly a decade and the combined efforts of 50 craftsmen to complete the coach and ship it to the UK, missing the Queen's 80th birthday by 8 years. But the final result is truly extraordinary.
Ultimately, it wasn't just made to be this wonderful plaything. It's actually a serious working piece of equipment. So it's very much a working work of art.
And with its elegant combination of glamour, history, and modern convenience, it's a coach well worthy of its place in Buckingham Palace's Royal Mews. From the vast expanse of Royal Mall to the imposing 20th century facade of Buckingham Palace, it's all about showing off.
When you walk in, it's a little bit like the TARDIS. You get past the kind of dull grey exterior and in you go, and all is opulence. And this wonderful sense of being transported into another world.
George IV and his architect John Nash transformed what was Buckingham House into this most famous of royal palaces. Guests enter the Grand Hall and make their way through to the Grand Staircase.
The Grand Staircase is a double-legged staircase that sweeps up to the first floor apartments.
If you look up to this glass ceiling, it's almost like God is shining down on you. And of course, lest we forget, and I'm sure George IV never forgot, royalty, especially, was regarded as God's appointed messenger on earth, the divine right of kings.
After the staircase, visitors arrive at a series of state rooms.
The sequence of rooms by design in a royal palace are intended to get grander and grander as you get closer and closer to the heart of the monarchy and the private apartments of the monarch. But what's notable here is that they're all splendid.
The state rooms contain many great treasures from the royal collection, including the greatest painting and sculptures through the ages, and some of the best English and French furniture in the world.
Every one of those rooms is a glitzy show-off piece.
The grandest of all the state rooms is the White Drawing Room.
The White Drawing Room is exquisite, and that's so deliberate. It's all about reinforcing the mystery of monarchy. The grandest of the staterooms, adorned with French and English finest porcelain and furniture.
The White Drawing Room at Buckingham Palace is like a scene from a Disney film in many ways. You have these incredible high ceilings, everything decorated in gold, gold piano, enormous chandeliers. You know, it's what you'd imagine the Queen's Palace to look like.
This room holds a palace secret.
If you look very carefully, there are two mirrors, and one of them is just a chink ajar. And if you ask very nicely, someone might show you that it actually opens slightly. And that is the way that the Queen accesses her private apartments.
The Queen enters from her royal closet, and out she pops, there to be presented among the chosen few. So really, Nash did us proud, or rather, did her proud.
With no expense spared, Buckingham Palace has been wowing kings, queens, presidents, and the public for hundreds of years. It's the quintessential palace in the heart of London. Next time, an ex-royal butler accused of stealing from the palace reveals the impact of these shocking charges.
The bottom of my wall fell out. I was heading straight to prison.
We uncover the secrets of Balmoral, a favourite getaway for generations of royals.
This was their patch, where they could do things how they liked.
And tensions rise at the palace as President Trump breaks the rules.
Trump knew he needed to be on the very best behavior.